I thought for a moment, then I continued. I'm afraid of the dark. I don't like what the dentist's going to do to me. I like breasts, big ones. Women with big breasts make great girlfriends. Mustard sucks. Nigerians steal, and I would never ride an American motorcycle. I paused. Mike was laughing. I went on. These are all beliefs that at one time or another I've had. I don't still have all of them, just some of them. It doesn't matter if they're true or not. They've been beliefs often born of experience, sometimes just learned out of prejudice. But that means they're true, doesn't it? He challenged. Not at all. Just because my experience of something is real, it doesn't mean it's universally true. It just means that once a Nigerian did steal a camera from my hotel. It so happens I really needed that camera, and without it I couldn't earn a living. So my experience became formative, and was further cemented and catalyzed by my own insecure situation. Got it. I'll give it a try. Just don't judge me, said Mike. You know I wouldn't do that, I replied. Okay, here goes. Authority's bad. That's my experience. Family betrays you. It's okay to betray them before they betray you. When my girlfriend leaves or dies, I'm going back into a cocaine addiction. The woman I always wanted in my life used crack. If I'm with a whore, I want her to be stoned. Bodies float. He looked quite thoughtful about that. He seemed quite hung up on that last point. Yeah, you've got it, I said. There are different ways to work with this sort of information. A psychotherapist will get his client to talk about it, sometimes for years. The gradual desensitization that takes place has a lot of benefit, but it is a slow process. Hypnotherapists often blunder right on in and do a regression exercise, taking the client back to the first incident of betrayal, and work on that. They can sometimes, in a single session, desensitize the issue to such a degree it's never a problem again. That makes them the envy of psychotherapists. But there's one problem. If they're not very careful, they can re-traumatize a client to such a degree that the problem is never going to go away. Now, keeping in mind this is your client's brain you're playing with, the stakes are pretty high here. For this reason, I'm very careful about using regression. I'd rather take a little time and let the client do the work. Get them to talk about it. Let them work it through a little. Simply doing that helps them desensitize the issue to a large degree. Let's be absolutely sure before doing a regression that may turn out to be damaging. Besides, there's a possibility we won't need to anyway. As you learn more about the client, you can often avoid some parts of their therapy entirely. As the true makeup of the individual begins to become apparent, then it gets easier to see what really needs to be addressed. Mike, for example, does not need to know how best to weigh a body so that it no longer floats. He'd be way better advised to learn not to ice his clients. Better for everybody, actually. At Liz's house in Kitsilano, her guests were fighting. My sense of déjà vu had been correct. It sounded like her guest's relationship was in its death throes. That didn't make anything any easier for Liz. It was snowing, and there was some doubt she'd be able to get them to the airport on time. So she called her ex-husband, who had a four-wheel drive, to help her out. Liz's ex-husband's a wonderful man. He's creative, he's smart, and he's managed to keep the love of his wife in a special way since their separation. It sounds odd, but when you realize what honest people they are, you can see how it can work. She told me later how he arrived and chatted with both her visitors as a long-lost friend does. He then took them all to the airport, completely oblivious to the terminal rupture in the guest's relationship. At the airport, Liz's friends tearfully said goodbye. The boyfriend cut her very short, and the moment was forced and awkward. Meanwhile, Liz's ex-husband gushed over them both with customary bonhomie. In the check-in queue, he wished them a happy journey and said how much he looked forward to seeing them both come back soon. "We should do some stuff together next time you come. That would be nice, wouldn't it, Liz?" "We'll see," she replied tactfully. "I think it would be just great. You're looking a little peaky, Liz. Are you all right?" That struck me as the sort of thing that happened to me while I was married. In those days, if there was a wrong end of a stick, I was sure to grab hold of it. I'd somehow managed to find the wrong interpretation of virtually any situation. Then, naturally, I'd beat myself over the head with that wrong end of the stick, unknowingly, but with grim determination. Perhaps this is just part of being male. Fortunately, this ability seemed to fade when my marriage was put out of its misery by my ex-wife. I like Liz's ex, he's great. When a hypnotist snaps his fingers, he's engaging the fight or flight response. He will usually also say the word sleep or some other instruction. The simultaneous snap and the suggestion has an interesting result. The theory says that the conscious level of thought focuses on the snap. It looks for the threat and goes into a state of hyper-awareness. Imagine a deer in a forest. On hearing a snapping twig, the creature is suddenly all eyes and ears and looking for the threat. Its heart pounds and its mind races. It's literally all consciousness. There's no room for subconscious activity there. In humans, the mind behaves a little differently. Once startled, the subconscious is left to take hold of the other instruction, the more subtle, in many ways more powerful word, sleep. It's as though this message now has a clear and unobstructed way directly into the subconscious. As such, it's much more powerful than it would otherwise be. I do not know if this theory is correct. However, I do know the process works very well. I sometimes just tap a client on the head at a moment they least expect it and say the word sleep, and in they go. That quick. I don't get excessively hung up on how or why it works. Much smarter people than myself have been trying to figure that one out for many years. However, just because there's little in the way of agreement about why hypnosis works among individuals with greater experience of it, there's no doubt whatsoever that it does. I remember seeing nurses in a paediatric ward in the UK telling the young children that the injection they were about to have wouldn't hurt. Those told that it wouldn't hurt barely felt it unless they were watching the needle. Those children were already in a state of fight or flight, and so they were highly receptive to suggestion. That was quite a while ago, when nurses looked like nurses. They had crisp, starched uniforms, watches that hung upside down, big belts and nylons. They were nurses you could believe in. For some reason, modern nurses look more like bag ladies. I suppose someone thought that was a good idea, but I've yet to meet anyone that actually agrees. The same state of suggestibility is present in people in extended situations of fear and conflict. During any number of wars, radio broadcasts, which in any other situation would appear absurd, are absorbed as though they are the gospel truth. The subconscious mind is extremely suggestible when exposed to some of our more primal feelings, such as fear and jealousy. The military is quite aware of this. Soviet forces tested adrenaline-producing airborne poisons that create terror in populations of towns and cities as far back as the early 1980s. While under the influence of such poisons, a population is susceptible to panic and suggestion. A division of advancing Red Army ground troops could be argued to be a major form of negative suggestion.